Welcome to another deep dive. Today we're going to be looking at something really cool. It's about the future of governance and how we can create a more ethical world.
I think it's going to be exciting to unpack some ideas shared by Prifat Ranjan Sarkar, who was a social and spiritual philosopher.
Okay, cool.
And these are from a series of discourses he delivered in 1959.
Wow, back in 1959.
Yeah, and even though they were shared decades ago, they feel remarkably relevant to the conversations we're having today about, the role of ethics in leadership.
Yeah, for sure.
And the need for, active and engaged citizenry. So
it's almost like these timeless principles that are always going to be relevant regardless of the specific time period.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so the source material is a collection called The Need for a Moral Force in Governance. One of the things that struck me right away is Sarkar's assertion that dark shadows of immorality are fast taking definite shape and hampering human progress. What are your thoughts on that statement and how it might relate to our current world?
Wow, yeah, that's a powerful statement, isn't it? And while the context might have been different back then, this core concern about ethical leadership, it kind of transcends time, right?
For sure.
Whether it's 1959 or 2023, the need for a strong moral compass in those who hold positions of power, it remains crucial.
Yeah.
And Sarkar's words really remind us that unchecked immorality can hinder progress and create a society where justice and fairness are compromised.
It makes you wonder what forms of immorality in governance people see playing out in our world today.
Yeah, that's a great question. And this is where it gets really interesting because Sarkar goes on to argue that we can't solely rely on government institutions, especially within democratic structures, to provide this moral compass.
Oh, interesting.
He believed that true moral force needs to come from somewhere else.
I find that idea to be both intriguing and a bit challenging. On the one hand, we often look to governments to set ethical standards and provide guidance. But on the other hand, history has shown us time and again that power can be corrupted and that even democratic systems can be manipulated. So, where does this leave us? If not the government, then who or what should be the source of this moral force?
Yeah, and Sarkar was really ahead of his time, I think, in recognizing the limitations of relying solely on government for moral guidance, right? He saw the need for a force outside of formal political systems to hold those in power accountable and to ensure that ethical considerations remained at the forefront of decision-making.
So give me some examples of what that might look like.
Well, think about, the role of civil society organizations, grassroots movements, ethical leaders in various fields, even the power of individual conscience.
Right.
These forces can act as powerful checks and balances to ensure that governance remains grounded in principles that benefit humanity as a whole.
That's a great point. When we look at contemporary examples, we see the impact of these forces all around us. From environmental activists raising awareness about climate change to human rights organizations advocating for social justice, there are countless individuals and groups working tirelessly to promote a more ethical and just world. It's almost as if there's this collective moral awakening happening, driven by a shared understanding that we can't simply wait for governments to do the right thing. We have to take action ourselves.
Oh, that's right. And speaking of forces for change, Sarkar placed a lot of emphasis on the middle class.
Interesting.
He had this really powerful quote where he said, "When governments act against the collective interests of the middle class, their downfall is practically guaranteed." He believed that the middle class was essential in driving progress and holding those in power accountable.
That's a bold statement.
Yeah.
What do you think he meant by that? Why did he see the middle class as such a pivotal force for change?
Well, what's fascinating about this point is the historical and socioeconomic context, right? So back in 1959, the world was undergoing a lot of transformations. The middle class was expanding in many countries, and their role in shaping political and economic systems was becoming increasingly apparent.
Makes sense.
They were gaining education, economic influence, and a stake in a stable and just society.
Right.
So Sarkar recognized this growing power and saw it as a potential catalyst for positive change.
It makes you wonder if this idea still resonates with today's political landscapes. Has the role of the middle class evolved? Do they still hold that same power to influence positive change?
That's a great question, and one that deserves deeper exploration because it's clear that the global landscape has shifted dramatically since 1959.
Of course.
With economic disparities widening in many parts of the world and political systems facing new challenges.
Right.
However, the core idea that a politically aware and engaged citizenry is essential for a functioning and just society remains as relevant as ever.
So even though the specific composition of the middle class might have changed, the underlying principle of citizen engagement as a driver of progress still holds true. It's not about specific socioeconomic demographics, but about people coming together, recognizing their shared interests, and demanding a system that works for everyone.
Exactly. And this brings us to another key point that Sarkar emphasized: the importance of a politically educated populace, particularly the youth.
Interesting.
He firmly believed that when people are politically aware and engaged, it becomes much harder for corrupt leaders to manipulate and exploit them for personal gain.
Yeah.
He saw education as a safeguard against tyranny and a tool for empowering citizens to demand better from their leaders. He even went so far as to call out politicians who intentionally mislead those who are less informed.
It's almost as if he's saying, don't be a pawn in someone else's game. Educate yourselves, understand the issues, and make informed decisions. He seems to be advocating for a proactive and empowered citizenry that doesn't just accept the status quo, but actively shapes the world they want to live in. But how do we navigate this in today's age of information overload and misinformation? It's easier than ever to be swayed by slick rhetoric or misleading narratives. How do we stay informed and ensure we're basing our decisions on facts and critical thinking?
Yeah, that's the question we all need to grapple with, right? It's no longer enough to simply consume information. We need to develop the skills to critically evaluate sources, to discern fact from fiction, and to engage in respectful dialogue with those who hold different perspectives.
Right.
It's a continuous learning process, and one that requires a commitment to seeking out diverse viewpoints and engaging in thoughtful reflection.
So it's not just about being right. It's about being open to learning, to challenging our own assumptions, and to finding common ground even when we disagree. It's about cultivating a culture of intellectual humility and curiosity.
Absolutely, and it's within this context of informed citizenry and a strong moral foundation that Sarkar introduces his most intriguing idea: the concept of sadvipras.
Now that sounds fascinating. Tell me more about these sadvipras. Who are they, and what role do they play in Sarkar's vision of a more ethical and progressive world?
Sadvipras are individuals who embody a powerful blend of morality and spirituality. They're not just good people in a conventional sense. They're guided by a deep commitment to ethical conduct and spiritual awareness.
Okay, that sounds intriguing, but what does that actually look like in practice? What distinguishes a sadvipra from, say, a well-intentioned but perhaps less evolved individual?
Well, Sarkar believed that sadvipras are guided by principles like Yama and Niyama, which are ethical guidelines found in many spiritual traditions.
Interesting.
So Yama focuses on our actions in the world, things like nonviolence, honesty, integrity, and self-control.
Okay.
While Niyama is more about cultivating our inner world, so purity, contentment, self-discipline, and a deep connection to a higher purpose.
So it's not just about being nice or doing good deeds. It's about cultivating a deep inner transformation that naturally leads to ethical and compassionate action.
Exactly. And Sarkar believed that by integrating these principles into our daily lives, we could purify our minds, strengthen our willpower, and develop a deeper connection to our inner selves and to the world around us.
Right.
And it's this inner transformation that then radiates outward, influencing the way we interact with others and the choices we make in the world.
I can see how this aligns with Sarkar's vision of a more ethical and progressive society. If more individuals were to embrace these principles, it would undoubtedly have a ripple effect, creating a more just and harmonious world.
Yeah.
But how realistic is this? I mean, not everyone is going to become a spiritual master or dedicate their lives to intense self-cultivation.
Yeah, that's a fair point, and Sarkar recognized this. He didn't believe that everyone needed to become a monk or a guru to make a difference. He emphasized that the path of the sadvipra is not limited to any particular religion or spiritual tradition.
Yeah.
It's about embodying these principles of ethical conduct and spiritual awareness in whatever way resonates with each individual.
So it's more about a way of being, a set of values that guide our actions and interactions regardless of our specific beliefs or backgrounds.
Precisely. And what's particularly inspiring about Sarkar's vision is that he believed that anyone could potentially become a sadvipra. It's not about achieving some lofty spiritual attainment. It's about making a conscious choice to align our lives with these principles, to strive to be the best versions of ourselves, and to use our talents and resources to make a positive impact on the world.
This idea of personal transformation leading to societal transformation is really powerful.
Yeah.
But how did Sarkar envision these sadvipras actually bringing about change in the world? Did he believe they would take on traditional leadership roles, or was it more about a subtle, almost invisible influence?
Well, Sarkar believed that sadvipras would naturally emerge as leaders in various fields, not necessarily through formal positions of power, but through the sheer force of their moral authority and their ability to inspire and motivate others.
That's
He saw them as the true revolutionaries, the ones who would lead the charge towards a more equitable and enlightened society, not through violence or coercion, but through the power of their example and their unwavering commitment to ethical principles.
It almost sounds like he's describing a new paradigm of leadership, one that's not based on dominance or control, but on service, compassion, and a deep understanding of interconnectedness.
Exactly, and this brings us to another fascinating point that Sarkar made. He believed that there would inevitably be a clash between the old corrupt ways of governing and this emerging force of sadvipras.
Oh, wow, that sounds intense. So it's like a battle between the forces of darkness and light, a cosmic showdown between good versus evil.
Well, it may not be quite that dramatic, but Sarkar did believe that as more and more individuals embraced this path of ethical leadership and spiritual awareness, they would naturally come into conflict with those who clung to power and self-interest.
Right.
He saw this clash as an unavoidable part of the process of societal transformation. It's like the growing pains of a new world struggling to be born.
So how did he envision this clash playing out? Would it be a violent revolution, a massive uprising?
Well, Sarkar actually envisioned two possible scenarios.
Okay.
In the optimistic scenario, those in positions of power would recognize the wisdom and effectiveness of the sadvipras' approach and willingly adopt their principles.
Okay.
This would lead to a peaceful transition towards a more just and ethical society where collaboration, compassion, and wisdom would guide decision-making.
Okay, I like that scenario. A smooth and harmonious shift towards a brighter future. It feels very aligned with the progressive and optimistic spirit that seems to permeate Sarkar's work.
Exactly, but he also acknowledged a more challenging scenario.
Okay.
If those in power refuse to embrace these principles, clinging to their corrupt ways and prioritizing self-interest above the well-being of the people, then a physical revolution might become necessary.
I see.
In this case, he believed that the people led by these morally and spiritually empowered sadvipras would rise up and demand change, ultimately wresting power from those who abused it.
So it's not about being passive or naive. It's about recognizing that sometimes systemic change requires a more forceful approach, especially when those in power refuse to listen to the voices of the people.
And that's where Sarkar's emphasis on political education and awareness becomes so crucial. He believed that a politically informed and engaged citizenry was essential not only to prevent corruption and abuse of power, but also to create a society where power is distributed more equitably and decision-making is participatory.
It's about empowering people to understand the systems that shape their lives and to participate actively in creating a world that reflects their values.
Precisely. And this brings us to another intriguing aspect of Sarkar's vision. He believed that in a world striving towards ethical governance, the role of the military would gradually diminish over time.
That's interesting. So in a world guided by ethical principles where conflicts are resolved through dialogue and cooperation, the need for military might would naturally decrease.
Exactly. Sarkar envisioned a world where resources would be redirected from military spending to investments in education, healthcare, and social programs that promote the well-being of all people.
Wow.
He saw a future where the focus would shift from military dominance to the development of human potential, to the promotion of peace and understanding, and to the creation of a global society based on cooperation and mutual respect.
That's a powerful and hopeful vision. It aligns with this idea that as we evolve as a species, we can move beyond the limitations of our current systems and create a world that reflects our higher aspirations. It's about moving from a culture of fear and scarcity to a culture of abundance and compassion.
It certainly is, and it's a vision that requires a fundamental shift in our thinking, a move away from the old paradigms of power and control towards a new way of being based on empathy, compassion, and a deep reverence for life. It's about recognizing our interconnectedness and understanding that our individual well-being is inextricably linked to the well-being of the planet and all its inhabitants.
So how do we get there? How do we start to dismantle these old systems and build a world that reflects these higher values? Sarkar's ideas offer some fascinating insights, but they also raise a lot of questions. We'll continue to explore these ideas after a quick break. Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We've been talking about how to create a more ethical and progressive world based on the work of Prevad Ranjan Sarkar, and it's clear that he was calling for a pretty radical shift in our thinking. A move away from the old systems of power and control towards a new way of being based on empathy, compassion, and a deep reverence for life. It all sounds incredible, but how do we actually make this happen in the real world?
Right. It's a big question, isn't it? And Sarkar doesn't necessarily offer a step-by-step roadmap,
Right.
but he does provide us with some guiding principles. He reminds us that real change starts with each of us, with the choices we make every single day.
So it's about aligning our actions with our values and inspiring others to do the same. It's about being the change we want to see in the world, right?
Exactly. And while individual action is essential, Sarkar also emphasizes the importance of collective action.
Yeah.
He believed that when people come together united by a common purpose and guided by ethical principles, they can create a force powerful enough to overcome even the most entrenched systems of oppression.
So it's about finding ways to connect with others, to build movements, and to create communities that embody these values. It's about recognizing that we're not alone in this journey and that there are countless others who share our longing for a more just and compassionate world.
Precisely. And one of the ways Sarkar believed we could contribute to this collective transformation was by challenging the so-called intelligentsia, who often perpetuate the status quo.
That's an interesting point. So it's not just about challenging corrupt politicians or greedy corporations. It's about questioning the ideas and assumptions that underpin these systems of injustice.
Exactly. Sarkar believed that many intellectuals, despite their education and supposed enlightenment, often become complicit in maintaining systems of oppression by promoting ideologies that justify inequality and exploitation.
Right.
So he called on those who saw through these facades to speak out, to challenge these harmful narratives, and to offer alternative visions for a more just and equitable society.
It sounds like he's encouraging us to use our voices, our knowledge, and our platforms to amplify the voices of those who are marginalized and to advocate for policies and practices that promote the well-being of all. It's about being truth tellers, even when it's uncomfortable or unpopular.
Absolutely. And remember, Sarkar also believed in the power of education to awaken the masses and create a more politically informed and engaged citizenry.
Yeah.
He saw education as the key to dismantling the systems of manipulation and control that keep people trapped in cycles of poverty and oppression.
It's about empowering people with knowledge, with critical thinking skills, and with the tools they need to participate in shaping their own destinies. It's about creating a world where everyone has the opportunity to reach their full potential and contribute to the collective good.
And this ultimately is what Sarkar's vision of a world shaped by sadvipras is all about. It's a world where power is decentralized, where decisions are made through participatory processes, and where the well-being of all beings is prioritized above all else.
It's a world where we move beyond the limitations of our current systems and embrace a new way of being based on cooperation, compassion, and a deep reverence for life. It's a beautiful and inspiring vision, and even though it might feel a bit idealistic, it's important to remember that even the most radical transformations begin with a single step.
So true. And as we wrap up this deep dive into Sarkar's ideas, I want to leave you with this final thought. Change may not happen overnight, but it does happen. And it happens because individuals like you and me choose to make a difference.
So what small steps can you take in your own life to embody these principles of moral action and contribute to a more ethical and progressive world? What will your contribution be to this grand vision of a future where humanity thrives? We hope this deep dive has sparked some inspiration and given you some food for thought. Until next time, keep diving deep and keep striving for a better world.